our main event. It is entitled The Antrims. Notes on the 3rd Antrim Battalion of the South Antrim Regiment Ulster Volunteers. Now, the area in and around Antrim Town is no stranger to conflict. From the 4th century AD, it was a centre that would be attacked at different stages by a range of Viking marauders and Celtic clans. But by the end of the 16th century, it was already being referred to by some as Gal Antrim. Translated, Antrim of the English. Even a strong element of local support for the 1798 rebellion never removed this staunch Anglo-Irish identity. Indeed, in the rebellion's aftermath, it would solidify and strengthen. By the advent of Home Rule being first proposed in 1886, the area, like the county as a whole, was firmly Unionist. As a local newspaper remarked in 1912, Belfast has today 5 of the greatest industries of their kind in the world, and it is the 3rd part in the kingdom. All this has been done under the Act of Union. Why should every other part of the country not have worked similarly and prospered under the same laws? Ulster was prospering under the Union, and with it, so was Antrim Town and its surrounding countryside and villages, including Randalstown, Crumlin and Glenavy. It and its people had no desire to risk that by changing their relationship with England. Now, the Ulster Covenant campaign was enthusiastically received locally. On Ulster Day, Antrim Town Unionists gathered at the Protestant Hall before marching as a body. Now, that very language indicates the militaristic character present in the periphery of events of the day, and indeed of events to come, to meet at Muckamore Unionist Club. A mass gathering then took place at Mill Row Presbyterian Church, where a cross-denomination service took place, after which the covenant was signed back in the Protestant Hall. Almost every house in Antrim Town is recorded as displaying a Union flag. Further west, in Randalstown, proceedings were similar, and again men gathered to march to several services. County Antrim was the only Ulster county where there was any significant organised dissent within Unionism against the Covenant, and it registered actually the lowest percentage male signing of the Covenant of Ulster County. But this, however, still came to a highly impressive over 68% of the population, about 33,000 men. Interestingly, now, Antrim women did not embrace this anti-covenant campaign to the extent of their menfolk, and almost 72% of Antrim women signed, and that's almost 40,000 women. In the aftermath of the main Antrim services, a procession once again formed up and made its way to Shane's Castle, where sports were held. On that day, Mr. Charles Curtis Craig, brother of the famous James Craig, MP for South Antrim, said, "I never did any act or any deed in all my life with a freer conscience and fuller certainty than I was doing the right thing than when I signed my name to that covenant." Now, in Shane's Castle they held sports. Sports was a commonly used term of the day for drilling and related activity, and there's no doubt that local Unionists were immersed in such activity. The Ulster Volunteer Force that was envisaged in late 1912 and formalised and officially announced in January 1913 was very slow to take the mantle of the sole Unionist military vehicle. Unionist clubs were the mainstay of activity for many during 1912 and 1913. In June 1913, Randalstown Unionist Club held a fete at Shane's Castle, which actually was simply a cover for a drill competition and displays. Drill squads from Unionist clubs in Randalstown and Muckamore were joined by squads from Ballymena and Queen's Island, Belfast, with each competing for an overall prize. On the day, a Mr. Davis from Hollywood Unionist Club adjudged Randalstown B Squad the worthy overall winners. In September 1913, an advisory board was appointed for the Ulster Volunteer Force, and with that came renewed efforts to mobilise this body, increase its membership, and unify unionism behind and under its banner. Now, a series of mass reviews were announced where Carson, the famous Edward Carson, would inspect the volunteers. And these began in Kilkeel on the 17th of September, ended in Armagh City on the 4th of October. And among those engagements were 4 County Antrim venues on the 20th of September. Ballyclare, Loughnmore, Antrim and Randalstown. That day began from Craigavon House in Belfast, where Carson and his massive entourage, first headed by motorcar to Ballyclare, accompanied alongside the now announced Ulster Volunteer Chief of Staff, the Chief Overall Commander of the UVF, General Sir George Richardson. Now, at Loughnmore, from there, from Craigavon, he made his way to Loughnmore, with the party proceeded along the journey by a full detachment of motorcycle dispatch riders. At Loughnmore, a local contingent of volunteers numbering 600 were inspected at the home of Lieutenant General Sir William Adair. And Sir General Adair, Adair was the commander of the entire County Antrim division of the Ulster Volunteers. In Antrim, the town is recorded as being lavishly decorated, and a massive fete was arranged in the castle grounds of Viscount Mazarine to raise funds for the Unionist cause. Now here there were 400 volunteers present, once again recorded as being inspected doing various drill movements. A special terrace was created where several hundreds of spectators were elevated to watch the proceedings before all of the participants marched through the park to the cricket field, where a demonstration was held. And here Lady Londonderry chaired the speeches. Now finally on the day at Randalstown, the Lisburn Standard reported that the front of the Randalstown Market House was the setting for a muster of 500 of the local force, including a body of nurses. The Yorkshire Post remarked that the entire village was electorally illuminated, with Carson being accompanied to the meeting point by a torchlit procession. The final of the day's reviews saw Carson address the men and women in a similar vein to the day's other meetings, a vein which was clearly illustrating the ever-increasing zeal of all unionism for the cause. And Carson's speech in Randalstown is really worth listening to. We are prepared. We must make any sacrifice, however great, so that we might forever put an end to this conspiracy against our civil and religious liberties. I could boast that I could live very comfortably and quietly in England. I could even try the ordinary methods of obtaining promotion in the profession which I have long belonged. But I spurn promotion. I spurn ease. I spurn wealth. I spurn everything while my fellow countrymen are in danger. And I devote myself to them. I know well there is not a corner of the globe in which the Union Jack flies over His Majesty's great dominion where the old Ulster blood is not throbbing in sympathy with them, watching to see whether the men they had left behind in this country were worthy descendants of those who had gone before. Our opponents might say, we can easily put you down, as probably they could if they were allowed to employ the forces of the Crown against us. But the spirit of the Ulsterman never dies, and whether it be long or whether it be short, we will carry on our struggle, not for a day, but for year after year. And even if in the start they should succeed by their tricks and machinations in robbing us of all that we hold dear, we will go on, and we will tell them they might issue their edicts from a nationalist parliament in Dublin and make commands of us from their Irish executive, but their commands will be treated like waste paper. We will go on until we get back all that has been filched from us. And it is here that our volunteer army will come in. We are not going to submit to that Home Rule proposal. We will not have it. No Home Rule. The Randalstown commander brought this event to a close, proposing a vote of thanks to Sir Edward. In a very telling few lines of his short address, he assured their leaders of two things: that Randalstown women could nurse, and that Randalstown had men who could shoot straight. Just a week prior to the Antrim inspections, the official UVF returns for County Antrim to headquarters, dated the 12th of August, detailed 4 county subdivisions: South, East, Mid Antrim and North, numbering a total of 6,285 men. Now, within the Southern Division, it included Randalstown District with 268 men, broken down between Hillstown with 54, Randalstown 94, Mackerabeg 34, Staffordstown 49, Ballydromall 37. Antrim District numbered 149, split between 130 in Antrim and 19 in Muckamore. Crumlin 134 men, with 103 at Crumlin, 31 at Gartree. Glenavy 123 at 7 small centres across the area. Glenavy 78 at Glenavy, 15 at Ballydonaghy, 5 at Crewe, 10 at Fourscore. Killeed had 52 men listed between British, Gortnagallen, Aldergrove, Dungonal and Ballynadranta. The regimental structure for this county had not been fully formalised at this point. However, eventually a South Antrim Regiment was put in place underneath the command of Lieutenant Hercules Arthur Pakenham of Langford Lodge. Also the regimental HQ, incidentally. This regiment consisted of 3 distinct battalions. The first was centred in Lisburn. The second, essentially this mid of the South Antrim constituency, encompassed an area running from Dunmurray to Achalee. And the 3rd Battalion of the South Antrim Regiment, Ulster Volunteer Force, was the Antrim Battalion, with its main centres Antrim Town and Randalstown, also stretching down to and encompassing Killeed, Dundrod, Glenavy and Crumlin. Now, the officer in command of the 3rd South Antrim Battalion, Antrim, was the 12th Viscount Mazarine and Ferrard. The ornately named Algernon William John Clockworthy Scaffington. Born in 1873, by the formation of the Volunteers, the Viscount already had substantial military experience. After enlisting in the Cavalry Regiment 17th Lancers in 1895, he was promoted to captain in 1900 and until 1902 served in the Boer War. Now, during this short period he was wounded and received not 1 but 2 mentions and dispatches, later decorated with the DSO, the Distinguished Service Order. He retired from service in 1907, but he would later re-enlist with many of his own men upon the outbreak of the Great War, during which he served at the rank of Major with the North Irish Horse. It's also interesting to note that Mazarine and Ferrard the family connection, has a very strong connection with County Louth, in the vicinity actually of the Boyne, and he himself and the family had a strong connection to the Colin Orange Lodge just outside Drogheda. The second in command was William Hubert Webb, a linen manufacturer from Randalstown, who also was the president of the local Unionist club. Now, Webb's prominent role in the social and sporting life of the community was recognised after his death in 1950 via a still extant very recognisable symbol, the dedication of the Nielsbrook clock tower in his name. Upon Viscount Mazarine's return to the army, he would assume the command of the battalion. Now, the companies within the battalion, it's largely a very remote rural territory, so it covered quite a large area. Randalstown, Antrim, Muckamore, Drumgonal, Crumlin, Gartree, Glenavy, Ballyhill, and Dundrod. A, B and C companies were all within this greater Randalstown area, and we know from surviving records that A company had 5 sections, the first 3 of which were actually in Randalstown town itself. The 5th and 6th were at Ballylurgan. B company had 5 sections that stretched into the Staffordstown area, with C company's 4 sections having 2 in Hillstown, 1 in Caddy and 1 in Ballydromall. One of the Randalstown commanders was the brother of W.H. Webb, Oswald Brooke Webb. Glenavy was under the command of Dr. Arthur Musson, Drumgonal under A. Greer, and Muckamore underneath the command of S.G. Houghton. The Antrim Town officer in command was Henry Balfour Murray, a justice of the peace of Ardnavay. Murray was regarded as a gentleman, and it is notable that upon the conclusion of the Great War, he was among the first to make a donation towards a battlefield memorial for the 36th Ulster Division. The massive sum then of £50 was his contribution. Webb, Musson and Murray had all been prominent members of the County Antrim Organising Committee of the UVF that had been appointed in the fledgling days of the force on 20th of December 1912. Dr. Arthur Musson was a very, very prominent doctor and Orangeman, and highly regarded in South Antrim and particularly the Glenavy area. Now, the district also had 2 post houses within its boundaries for the use of the signalling and dispatch riding corps. In Antrim, that post house was codenamed AN. Mrs. Houghton, wife of the commander of Muckamore, was postmistress in the Protestant Hall. In Crumlin, a Miss English was the postmistress in Camlin House in Main Street. Now, at its peak strength, just after the outbreak of the Great War, the 3rd Antrim Battalion was the largest in the South Antrim Regiment, with an impressive 1,567 volunteers. By late 1913, the various units were openly drilling and participating in such events as route marches and socials. Church services for volunteers were a very common occurrence from this stage on. At a service for the Ulster Day anniversary in Muckamore Parish Church, volunteers from Antrim, Dungonal and Muckamore companies all attended, while in February 1914 a large church service took place at Glenavy, where volunteers from Glenavy, Crumlin, Gartree, Fourscore, Crewe and the Mount are all recorded as marching to the parish church underneath the command of the regimental commander. In early March, the annual general meeting of Antrim Unionist Club was presented with a report on local volunteering, and that stated that they now had in Antrim Town and vicinity 2 companies consisting of 227 volunteers, all of whom were most efficient. Just a few days earlier, the Randalstown companies of the UVF met at the market yard, where all 13 sections of the 3 local companies were reviewed before taking part in a drill competition. 1 man from each section was judged as being the best in their unit, and each was awarded a medal. At the close of that Saturday activity, W.H. Webb and O.B., the brothers, entertained the estimated 420 men at a smoking concert. Now, a really notable feature of the activity of the entire South Antrim Regiment, because it isn't mimicked everywhere else, is the large number of occasions when the whole body was gathered together. True military competency was adjudged to require large bodies of men to be training together, to be working together, and to know each other. And to this end, the regiment was more active than most others within the entirety of Ulster. Men of the 3rd Battalion first joined with comrades from the 1st and 2nd in March 1914, where a camp of instruction was held at the home of Regimental Commander Pakenham. The Langford Lodge setting, just a few miles from Crumlin, involved 130 officers from across the regiment being given instruction in a variety of military subjects and manoeuvres. The camp began at 9:30 a.m. with a march to Gartree Church on the Sunday, after which dinner was served at the camp at 1 o'clock. Monday's schedule for the men included classes on musketry, section drill, advanced guard, and even a lecture on company in attack. A mark of the importance of that occasion was the attendance, again to see the Antrim men, of General Sir George Rittison, the officer in command of the UVF. He visited on the Tuesday. On the 13th of April, the South Antrim men were once again graced by the presence of Sir Edward Carson, this time to receive the presentation of regimental and King's colours. The 3rd Battalion was presented standards by Carson himself. Around 80 nurses, primarily from the 3rd Battalion, also took part in the proceedings, where the Belfast newsletter reported almost 3,000 men were on parade. The same report remarked that of all the troops were equipped with bandoliers, belts and haversacks, and that the men of the 3rd Battalion were particularly striking. They alone wore slouch hats, each with a small red plume and a badge inscribed with the letters 3rd S.A. Carson presented the 3rd Battalion with its colours, the King's colour being the gift of Lady Mazarine, and the regimental colour it had been purchased via collection from across the battalion area. Carson's address to the men on that day concluded with the rallying cry. It was the spirit of the men behind the walls of Derry that held that city, and it is your spirit that is going to hold Ulster for us. In July, the entire 3rd Battalion participated in a parade and church service within the grounds of Antrim Castle, over 1,200 being said to be lined out on a part of the facility formerly known as the cricket ground. The area was no stranger to the use of volunteers, having been regularly used by the Antrim contingent of the battalion as a parade and training ground. A small medical corps of 24 nurses also attended underneath that Mrs. Collins. More notably, about 3,000 spectators were present at the proceedings. Now, even after the outbreak of the Great War, the battalion was still very active, with yet another joint engagement with the rest of the regiment taking place on Monday the 3rd of August. That was the regiment's largest ever muster. Over 3,000 volunteers taking part in a truly massive, monumental scale mimic battle near Stonyford. With it reported that many of those taking part had to march considerable distances to the setting from early morning. The scenario for that day was that a force was advancing south to attack an enemy based at Hillsborough, and the role of the 3rd Battalion in this engagement was that of the advancing enemy. Under the charge of Viscount Mazarine, the proceedings were reviewed and viewed by Antrim Divisional Commander Adair and Colonel Hackett Payne from UVF headquarters. The men were absolutely drenched during torrential downpours during the manoeuvres, which lasted over 6 hours. Now, with the advent of the war, many volunteers who were reservists immediately had returned to service, while many others also enlisted prior to the formation of the 36th Ulster Division. Enlistment for the entire duration of the war was high in the area, as indicated by several surviving sources. Antrim First Presbyterian Church alone recorded 123 parishioners joining the ranks. Antrim Second Presbyterian recorded 44, and Randalstown Old Congregation recorded 81. The majority of the 3rd Battalion Ulster volunteers who enlisted ended up within the ranks of the 11th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles, including some of their very prominent officers. One of the most notable is one of the Randalstown Company commanders, Captain Oswald Webb. The commander of D Company died from wounds received on the 1st of July at the Battle of the Somme. The Webb family would not be the only one to be touched by the events of the Somme. The localised basis of recruitment for Kitchener's army would unfortunately ensure that every street and rural community that had been under the banner of the 3rd Battalion, Antrim, South Antrim Regiment, Ulster Volunteer Force would have first-hand experience of the death and injury inflicted during the Great War. So ends tonight's presentation. To repeat, tonight's presentation was brought to you by the North Ulster Act Initiative. Thank you for joining us and listening. As always, bygone days history would remind you that these talks are just part of a wider project to disseminate history, forgotten, lost history, as far and wide as possible. To do that too, we have a large number of booklets available. Easily read, heavily illustrated, full colour, easily digested. There's 37 titles on Orange heritage, Loyalist heritage across Ireland. Some of our titles include the Ulster Special Constabulary, the B-Men, particularly poignant with this year being the 100th anniversary of both its formation and its 50th anniversary of its standing down. We have books on the Ulster Volunteers in West Down, in Monaghan, in Cavan, in Newcastle, in Londonderry City. We have books on the Orange heritage in most unusual places. Did you know there was 700 Orange men in Limerick? Did you know that there was over 40 Orange lodges in Cork? There was Orange lodges right across the length and breadth of Ireland. There's also booklets about the 36th Ulster Division and about the strong dynasty of Tynan Abbey. So please feel free to message us, or indeed you can purchase the books direct, or you can purchase them on eBay. They're priced at £4 directly, including postage, UK postage. So please get in touch about the books. Now, we're in a position tonight to announce our schedule for the next 4 weeks in the run-up to the July holidays / commemorations / celebrations. Now, next week, the 9th of June, we return to Forgotten Orangeism, the Forgotten Order, with an amazing story, a truly amazing story of the Royal County Orangemen, the Royal County being Meath. And this presentation will bring us to the Orange heritage of County Meath from 1795 to 1900. Within that, we will hear about probably the most unusual person to gravitate to the position of a county Grand Master, an ancestor of famous Catholic saint, St Oliver Plunkett himself. On the 16th of June, we return to the Ulster Volunteers with another presentation in association with North Ulster Act Initiative. And this time we'll be looking at the Ban Valley Volunteers, the formation and evolution of the Ulster Volunteers in Coleraine and District. On the 23rd, not the 23rd of June 2020, we will be having an overview of Lost Orangeism in the South and where it existed, entitled The Forgotten Order. Now this presentation will be brought to you in association with an organisation or a body in the South called Tasnatir in the Republic of Ireland. This collaboration is just an attempt to try and get this Orange history and Loyal Irish history to as broad and wide an audience as possible. A lot of their events would have as many as 600 people watching. And that will be a Zoom presentation, so something new on that night that we will go over the detail of near the time. On the 30th of June 2020, another presentation in association with North Ulster Act Initiative, the Maiden City Volunteers, when we will be looking at the City of Londonderry, the City of Derry Regiment of the Ulster Volunteer Force. It's 36 minutes past 8 on the 2nd of June 2020. Thank you again for joining Bygone Days History. Thank you for supporting this initiative by North Ulster Act, and we hope to see you again next week, 8 p.m. sharp. Please like, please share, please share wide. Thank you and good night.